I'm Kathleen Black. Welcome. What we're going to be discussing this month is a highly impactful topic. It's a topic that is going to be positive in any aspect of your life. It's one of those topics that truly, when it starts to kind of sink in, it's life-changing for us because it affects us positively in a personal realm, physical, emotional, mental well-being, as well as our business, our energy, and our prosperity. And that's something that, is invaluable for us when it affects all the facets of how we live our day-to-day life. And the topic that we're discussing today is the brain science of achievement. So how can I actually understand how my brain functions in order to allow me to achieve more? How can I systematically approach this? Because at any time of year, really, we've all written goals. How connected are we with those goals? How have we systemized our approach to have those goals be effective, to actually attain them? Because when we write these goals, we take the time to step out of our daily lives. We take the time to do something abnormal for ourselves. I always say we kind of rebel against who we are as people and say, you know what? I'm going to step aside of who I am right now, and I'm going to allow myself to envision or, have the privilege, give myself the privilege of really imagining who might I be 1 year from now. What does that person look like? What kind of things, what type of personality traits do they have? What kind of habits do they have? What kind of rituals do they have? What do they look like? What is their life built upon? Well, what type of things would I achieve if I were to be that person? Those are goals. Goals force us to go through the transformation of growing and becoming different, a new version of our best selves. Because if we were meant to be at our best selves today, really the process of life would be pretty depressing, right? So to speak. So what we're doing when we come into those goals is we're actually saying, you know what? I'm going to put the past aside. I'm going to put aside who I was yesterday. I'm going to put aside who I am today. And I'm actually just going to go for it. I'm going to really get in tune with what are my values, what triggers me emotionally, what gets me excited, right? What makes me feel good? What if I surrounded myself with those type of environments day in and day out? How would that change my quality of life, right? How would that happen? And I read something the other day, it was on a blog, and it was somewhat depressing. It was somebody talking about passion, right? And it was a parenting blog, and they were talking about, you know what, it's unfair to expect our children to grow up and think that they're supposed to be passionate about something, that this is this, 19th century lie told to the middle class. In actuality, just because it's not one thing, all of us really become passionate about certain feelings, about certain environments, about certain goals, and that's fascinating. It's amazing. So how do we plug into that? Because certainly I understand where they were coming from, that passion can be this pressure and this big buzzword, but what we're talking about today is taking that time, just like we do when we set goals, to put aside, what am I doing today? Because those things, they're going to cloud our judgment, right? Our brain works in a certain way. It works on habits and routines. So it says, Kathleen, you get up today and you're going to want to go to Starbucks because unfortunately that's a negative habit that I've set. So every day, even though it's been 2 years, I have to consciously set myself up to not drive past Starbucks because I have a little bit of a weakness when it comes to lattes, right? So I try not to do that. So I always joke that, my body still has this preset wiring, right? I always talk about the Walt Whitman quote, many of his that I love, but I find myself on the verge of a usual mistake, right? I find myself on the verge of a usual mistake. And why is that? Because we're all so entrenched in this pre-programming that we don't really understand the capacity of. It's so huge. The level of our decision making that happens on the unconscious side of our brains is phenomenal, 90 to 95%. So what if I took some time, instead of, getting up and, getting the alert not to go to Starbucks and going and saying, you have to get all these things done to be productive. What if I stood back for a minute and I said, what would my ideal look like, right? What's my ideal? Because an ideal is a very empowering thing, whether it be in business or it be in personal. Because here's the great thing about ideals, right? Viktor Frankl talks about them. If you have a chance, look up some of his YouTubes. Fascinating. But Viktor Frankl is great about this, right? He went through the concentration camps, went through the whole thing and said, what's man's search for meaning? That's his book. And talked about the power of ideals. Because if you push a man or a woman or a human child to go towards their ideal, and the ideal's up here, then they'll actually reach what they're capable of. If you put somebody out and just say, do your best, see what you can do, they'll fall far below what their capability is. An ideal is a perfect thing because an ideal says, I only compete against me. But not personally, not in an aggressive way, right? I'm not competing to try to tear down who I am. I'm competing against the last version of myself. An ideal says that if I try to get as close to perfection, or for those of you who don't like that word, to the ideal outcomes, the ideal settings in my life, that if I try to get as close to that, then that will be the best I can be. If I try to get as close to Adam's ideal on our team or Miranda's ideal on our team, I actually would probably fall much shorter because their ideal isn't mine. I can't compare it. So the beautiful thing about brain science and achievement actually says the number one most important thing I want to do is know what I want, right? I have to set my own personal ideal. And I can tell you from working with so many people with goal setting and values and emotional triggers, what people get stuck in is the now, right? That conscious mind who says, well, I'd like to take Sundays off and I'd like to do prospecting Friday mornings, but Sally has ballet class Friday morning, so I can't do that. And I have to pick up Tommy from after school Montessori by 5 o'clock on Tuesday, so I can't do my yoga. And therefore, all these things aren't going to work in my life, right? That juggle. The beautiful part about ideals and about brain achievement is take a minute to fall out of the habits, to let the rituals go. Rituals and habits are going to be really important to us, but let the ones that we have right now go to the side. And picture, you still have your children, you still have your profession, you still have the things you love, if that's yoga, if that's Ironmans, whatever it is, that's fantastic. Whatever it is, but clean the slate. Picture an ideal without anything in place now. Because rituals and habits are so unbelievably powerful when it comes to our brain science of how we operate every day, that if you don't push them to the side, they will create doubt and fear and anxiety about what you really want in life. This is why it's so fascinating when people say, go and find a career, build your career around the lifestyle you want. Right? If you feel like you're completely, incarcerated by being in an office 9 to 5, then probably you're not going to pick a career, ideally, where you're in the office 9 to 5. You're going to pick a career and a life around your ideal, right? So the number one first thing is have the audacity to say what you want. That's number one. I don't care what works for Sally. I don't care what works for Tommy. I don't care, if my whole family thinks I should be in a 9 to 5 role. This is what I've decided I want. Because it's so important that we always talk about, if you don't know what you want, you will be recruited by somebody who does. The higher energy is always going to win. So if I don't know what I want and I show up in my work day and I have 10 different distractions and 10 different people wanting my time and my energy, what do you think is going to happen? I'm going to be left with no time and energy towards those business results I want. So it's very easy, very quickly, setting those boundaries that I need to know specifically what I want. Not only because other people's energy is bigger, but because I'm going to become involved and hired for their grand plan. And there's nothing wrong with that, is there? Their grand plan, they have clarity about it. They know specifically what they want. They know specifically what help they need. They know specifically what they want from you. And if you don't know what you want, that's not their fault. And unfortunately, most of the time we resent those people who have that clarity because they're always kind of being specific about what they need for us. But really, it's up to us to, number one, know what I want so I can understand to say yes or no in my benefit. Right? I always tell the story because I think it's kind of funny that I was up at the cottage at one of the neighbors' houses and they had mentioned, wouldn't it be great, Kathleen, if you helped to write the newsletter, right? The newsletter. And without even thinking right away, I said, no, absolutely not, cannot do that. Then realized I was a little bit brash, right? My personality came ahead of me and I found myself on the verge of a usual mistake where I was being a little too direct and a little too blunt for my surroundings. So it came up that I said, no, absolutely not. I can't do this. And I explained after, you know what? I have really specific ways that I know whether to say yes or no to something. Because the truth is, could I do the newsletter? Absolutely. Could I probably do it efficiently in a good period of time? Would I think some people would enjoy what I wrote about? Yeah. But here's the truth of it. Is that something that energizes me? Is that something that's good for me? Or is that something I just think I should do to be a good neighbor? The truth is, I love the cottage. I love going there. I could care less the day that the loons land on the lake. I just want to know they arrive and they're healthy. I really don't care. So I'm probably not the right person to talk about when the ice goes out, when the loons land, and all that kind of stuff. That's just not what I'm meant to contribute. I contribute at the picnics. I contribute in other ways. But spending that time, probably not right for me. I would have said yes, and you know what the truth is? I don't think she wanted to write the newsletter either. I think she said yes and got kind of stuck with it, and now is hoping that I'll take it on because I should. when in the end, that's not really part of my best contribution. The things I want to say yes to should energize me, and I should have the clarity of where they're taking me. So I understand that's a little example, and you're probably going, yeah, Kathleen, where are you going with this? But just follow me a little bit here. So how your brain actually works, I'm actually going to put up a diagram on the screen here. It's not a diagram, actually, I'll take that back. It's a picture. So I'm going to put up two. First, I'm going to put up the communication model. So this is from NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming. For those of you, anybody who works with me as a client has probably seen this, or possibly some of our other coaches. So this is the Neuro-Linguistic Communication Model. And this is fascinating because we all know that in this generation, we're hit with an unprecedented amount of data, right? Unprecedented. It's just ridiculous how much information is coming at us. That really, truly, we do have ADD by our own choice, right? We're trying to multitask so much that we just have so much coming at us. So our brain is set up naturally to sift and sort. Even in past eras, there's still too much information, right? The color in the room, the sound of my voice, the words I'm using, the posture, the clothes I'm wearing. There's a million things that you could be looking at just in this video that is for you to absorb, let alone where you're sitting right now, what's going on around your environment. So what this model is showing you is that you have 2 million bits of information coming at you every single minute, all day long. Imagine, that's a lot, right? 2 million bits. And again, it could be a color, it could be the lighting, it could be the tonality, it could be my voice, posture, any of those things. That's a lot of information. So you have 2 million bits coming at you every single minute, all day long. What your brain is saying is, oh my goodness, this is way too much. So I need to do a couple things. I need to delete some of this. This is too much. I need to delete it. I need to get rid of it. Some of it, I'm going to distort it. Because you know what? I've got my memories, my beliefs, my past experiences, my language that I speak, anything that's happened to me before, or my knowledge, what I've read about, my understanding, my beliefs, I'm going to distort it. And that's perception, right? I'm going to distort it based on who I am, not based on what's happening. So I'm going to delete it, I'm going to distort it, and I'm going to generalize, right? We all know, even Blink, the word, all about that. Generalizations are huge. Our brain is actually wired to generalize because we have so much information coming at us at once that really this is where kind of stereotypes come from, or, you know, mass generalizations, because in order for our brain to process so much information, it has to be able to say, oh yeah, I've already done that before, snap decision. Oh yeah, I've talked to used salesmen before, and they tried to rip me off, and they were slimy and scuzzy, and yep, snap decision, I don't trust you. That's a generalization that comes from maybe folk, that comes from, tales, stories, experiences of our friends and family. Doesn't even have to be our experiences, right? So I'm going to delete, I'm going to distort, and I'm going to generalize. And those can be positive ways that I delete, distort, and generalize. They could be negative, and they could be neutral. I decide on their meaning. Nothing's neither good nor bad until I make it so, right? I decide on that. They're charged nothing until I do that. So really, the power in this and how our brain is wired is that when you first hear this, it might be like, wow, you know, my brain's taking up all this information, because you know what? After I delete, distort, and generalize, I'm only left with 134 bits out of that 2 million for every single minute. That's all I'm actually going to get consciously. Unconsciously, sure, you're going to take in some more, but consciously, only 134 bits. Now, of that, I'm going to be in categories. So of those 134 bits, I've got to fit them into 7 different categories, so kind of like subheadings. So it's always, pardon me, explaining to people, if you had an essay, right, and you were doing kind of the layout, the plan for the essay, the storyboard, so to speak, if it was a movie maybe. So you've got, you know, scene 1, I can only have 7 scenes. And I can only have 134 different points that have to fit somehow under those 7 scenes, which each have a topic, right? That makes sense? That's why in school, or a lot of educational forums, they talk about you can learn 7 or 5 points plus or minus 2. So up to 7, and it could be down to 3 for some people. That's how we actually process information. It's very impactful. So here's the thing that you're probably wondering, maybe, or you will wonder, is, well, Kathleen, if I have those 2 million bits coming in, and I only end up with 134 consciously every single minute, well, how does that happen, right? Like, how do I get to pick? Maybe we could go into that state that, you know, this is by default. I don't really have any effect on this, right? Like, I can't pick which 134 points that my brain chooses to make conscious to me. And you could say that, absolutely. It's a really good question, so I'm glad I posed it for you. But what the truth is that we have other parts of our brain that are actually designed in order to sift and sort for us. So they're designed to help us see what's important to us. Because here's the truth, if I know what I want, then I can go out into the world and I can look for it. If I don't know what I want, then no matter, even if something's amazing coming at me, I can't see it, right? It's just like when we're overwhelmed and we're having a long day, right? We're busy, we're booked back to back to back, and we know we're not going to get home to see our family or just to go to sleep, depending on our scenarios, to 11:30, midnight. Some of you 1 and 2 a.m. I get emails from my clients, and I'm thinking, thank goodness I don't have my phone on the buzzer, right? I get it in the morning. So we're working late nights. So you're up, you're having those busy days, and here's what happens. When we're that entrenched in just trying to get through a process, so I'm trying to get through A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I'm just trying to check it on my list. I met with Mrs. Brown. I met with Mr. Brown. I met with, Sally Ann. I went and did my offer. I went and did my showing. When we're that busy, we don't see opportunities. We don't see things available to us because our whole bandwidth is in survival mode. I just want to get home where I can breathe, where I've got all these things done. I don't see opportunities in that environment. So this is the main thing. Is it design or default, right? If I'm overwhelmed and I am busy, my brain is just focused on getting through the day. I could have had the best possible opportunity, to list my neighbor's house, and they were trying to wave at me and they were trying to talk to me, but I was like, oh, I'm busy and I'm in a rush and I gotta go. And they said, no, I really need to talk to you about something to do with the house. And I thought, oh, they're trying to bug me again about building a fence, and don't even listen. And then 2 days later, it turns out my neighbor's house is for sale. Well, in that kind of environment where I'm just trying to get through the day and breathe, I can't see that opportunity because I've sifted and sorted my brain to say, narrow focus. Just look at what you need to do to get through today. This is exactly how our brain works. So in the morning, we're going to program. So there's something called a reticular activating system. So the reticular activating system is a really phenomenal thing. It's actually part of your frontal lobe. So it's a specific part of your brain that's close to your brainstem. And what it's designed to do is to sift and sort information. So that's its design. So the cool thing is that, yeah, a lot of this is going to be done unconsciously because we have these beliefs, we have these perceptions of life, but a lot of it we can actually program to help us consciously, right? So the conscious mind is the goal setter. The unconscious mind is the goal getter. So you want to align these two things, which is why visualization is so important. When we spend the time to visualize, we actually help to set this brain science to go towards what we're looking for. So we actually allow it to let us see what we're trying to see. Now, Tony Robbins does this very effectively in his events, where you say, okay, I want you to close your eyes, and when you open your eyes, you only look for red, only look for red, only look for red. Then you open your eyes, and of course, all you look for and all you gravitate for is red. And he'll say, well, what did you see that was brown? You have no clue. And he does a great job of talking about, you'll even start to make things up that were red and say, well, it's burgundy, it's kind of red, or, it's reddy brown, I think it could count as brown. So even look for things to make them up and say they're that. He does a phenomenal job of it. And it's exactly what our minds do. So if I set a goal or an outcome, and in the morning, I concentrate on that goal or outcome, my brain is actually now wired to look for those opportunities. So it's not true that, I always wanted roses and never saw they were amongst me. It's that I never look for them, right? People will talk about, it's uncanny how I set this goal and all of a sudden I went into life and I noticed, wow, that's an opportunity. I could talk to that friend who knows that friend who could maybe get me an interview in that company. It's because the opportunity always existed. It's because if you're told to look for red, you look for red in a sea of a rainbow of many different colors. That's the reality. If you set a specific goal and you go out into the world where you're getting 2 million bits of information every single minute, you will sift. You are training your brain to sift and sort that information towards that goal. If you have no design in sight, any road takes you there, right? I always love to quote that Alice in Wonderland where she goes up to the quote cat, and I'm not reading it, so I'm going to misquote it. But she says, well, which road do I take? And he said, well, where do you want to go? And she said, I have absolutely no clue. And he said, well, then of course, any road will take you there. And we kind of laugh and think, this is kind of ironic and whatnot. But really, this is exactly the way our brains are going to work. So our brains are wired to sift and sort information. So when I say that if you know what you want, the greater energy wins, the person who has more clarity towards what they're going for is actually going to have that achievement. They're going to have that outcome. It's the same thing as when you meet for a buyer consultation, and I know my desire is to educate, communicate in the value in working with me. I know that with such clarity when I meet with the buyer that my likelihood of them wanting to sign a contract with me is 98%. It's extremely high. It's the same thing when it comes to how we live our daily lives. So I talked about at the beginning, set your ideal. What is your ideal work week? What is your ideal work month? How many weeks of holidays do you want to take in a year? This is a perfect one. How many people in real estate say, I don't have time to take a holiday? This really, your brain works the same way as scheduling systems, right? I don't have time to take a holiday. Something really miraculous happens. If you use a computerized scheduler or even a book, you could even use a scheduling book, although I do not recommend it, but you could. So let's say 4 months from now, I booked a week off in that scheduler. Provided I know how much my holiday costs and I'm putting aside towards that weekly and I have a structure that I can do that. I mean, we understand that finances are largely part of this, right? If I'm doing that, but I book that week off, something phenomenal happens. I don't book it up in my schedule. It's like magic. And then that time comes and I have it off. I have nothing booked in that time. So I've moved everything. I've moved my world around it to allow that to happen. Now on the other side, I can do it by default. I can get overwhelmed, I can get tired, I can get too much where I'm just trying to breathe, right? Running that way. Running in default has a byproduct of burnout. Running by design towards my ideal has a byproduct of achievement. So you can choose to build a plan, work your plan. We all know this. The biggest work is your plan. Set it on autopilot. Setting your goals on autopilot isn't just about what do I do daily, what do I do weekly, what do I do monthly. It's about taking the time to actually visualize and focus. Okay, the people who have the closest, most clarity, there are two top things that are linked to achievement. Number one, first and foremost, above everything, exercise. People who exercise are much more likely to have clarity and reach their goals. Number two, meditation. So exercise or meditation is only second to exercise because it creates obviously those chemical releases in our body and allows us to have clarity and focus. So very, very positive. Second to that would be meditation for obviously the exact same reason, because we have clarity, right? We're taking the time to know, what do I want that day to look like? Because it's not by default. We can run our lives just kind of, the Forrest Gump principle, right? Chocolate or feather. We can run our lives that way, or I can know exactly what I want. So when I talk to you, I have clarity. I can hear what you want and I can work those two together without compromising what I need from that situation. If I don't know what I want, I will simply work with what you need. That's the only energy distribution or only energy exchange that's happening. I'm working for your outcome and I don't even realize it. Because based on what you're saying, I'm just trying to, well, what's good for me and let me get it close. If I knew what I wanted, I could allow a situation where I'm exchanging energy, not just kind of playing off of yours, right? I have a specific plan. So truly, if we don't know what we want, if we don't have clarity, someone else will recruit you. If you're not working for your goals, you're working for somebody else's in every single scenario, whether that be with clients, whether that be with our friends and family, whether that be with our health choices, whatever that is, right? You think about all the marketing and all the advertising when it comes to kind of fast food and health choices. If you don't know what you want, your energy is very powerful. It's going to come in and it's going to choose by default. Or you take that idea and you work with your brain and you say, in all aspects of my life, this is specifically what I want. And you make choices towards that. Now what you're doing, where I said we're going to get back to habits and rituals, now what you're doing is saying, how can I create an environment that takes away willpower? How can I create an environment where I don't need to use willpower to get what I want? An environment that actually supports making it easier for me to go towards my decision. So, for example, a home where I don't have, chocolate or soft drinks. This is an example, easy stuff, right? Chocolate or soft drinks in order to break down my willpower. How do I set up my business and my schedule in a way that makes it easier for me to achieve and to succeed? So this is obviously just the start of a conversation for us. We're going to be continuing this on. This is a very, very preliminary discussion. So I really look forward to any feedback or any questions from anyone. And in coming months, we're going to do a couple of different parts to this particular topic in order to really allow you to leverage that brain science of achievement. Because this isn't just some new age fluff, right? It's actually proven now again and again with different psychological, different research testing. There is so much behind that this is exactly how our brain works. It sifts and sorts information based on what we see and what we think. You heard me, what we see and what we think. If what I see, I interpret by the way I think to be negative, that's where self-fulfilling prophecy comes from. The world is not as it is, the world is as I am. And that's the biggest thing that brain science and research is actually supporting now. My world is based on a mirror image of who I am and how I think. So if I am looking to walk into a scenario and I think it's going to be awful, I'm going to say and do everything to make that a reality. I won't even necessarily know it consciously. If I look at a scenario and I want it to be positive and successful, and I have a certain outcome that I want, I'm going to align myself to see all the tips, all the cues, all the opportunities to allow me. It's like when people say that the universe conspires towards your success or towards your demise, sometimes it's true because we plant all these seeds, right? So what are the seeds that we're planting? Because we either plant a garden or we have a net cast over us, right? If I have a net cast over us, I see that someone else is pushing down on me. Or I can say, these are the things I want, so I'm going to plant a few seeds. It may take 20 years to come to fruition, that's okay. But I'm going to plant some seeds of what I want. Because I know if I do that, I'm telling my brain to look for those opportunities. To look for them. Whether it's a lifelong quest that's going to take me 50 years or it's a short-term goal that's going to be 2 weeks. I want to be able to see the opportunities. Please, if you take anything from this webinar, it's that you truly are sifting and sorting out over 90%, much more, over 95% of the information coming at you in all ways, right? If you don't even have it on your radar, about a certain book or a certain movie, you haven't heard of it, you don't care to see it. All of a sudden somebody tells you about it and you see it everywhere. Oh, I heard somebody talk about such and such book, and then I noticed it online, and I noticed it everywhere else, right? I always tell the story that there was I saw a movie about the Camino de Santiago, which is pilgrimage that people do in Spain. So it's this ancient pilgrimage that people used to do, you know, in the biblical era, in order to go, and they'd kind of go all the way from France, all the way through Spain, up until the ocean. And it's considered a very holy passage, right? So I watched a movie just by fluke. I kept seeing about this movie. I'm like, that's really weird. I haven't heard about that before. Then I ended up to be on a plane and I saw the movie. I'm like, weird. I've been hearing about this forever. What a fluke. It's not a new movie. It's on the plane. Awesome. I'm going to watch it. If I hadn't heard of it, I never would have. It was on my radar, right? Then I went to my cottage, of which myself and my sister are the only one who bring books up, and there's about the Camino de Santiago and a pilgrim who did the pilgrimage. I'm going, that's really weird. Because I knew all the books here. I swear I knew them all. I've looked at them all. I've read 90% of them. I've never seen that book. Now, I would probably bet money the book wasn't there before, but is the truth that it wasn't? Or that I just had no interest in it? It didn't really pop out to me because I didn't know anything about it. Then I read the book. Then all of a sudden, I started to notice things online that were popping up. I'm going, really? Am I meant to take this holy pilgrimage? I don't really have 35 days to walk across Spain. But the idea was that it kept coming up on my horizon, on me thinking about it, because I heard about it a couple of times. Somebody say something, which led to the movie, which led to the book, which led to the online, and then things popping up everywhere in marketing. But the truth is, it probably was there all along, but I was never looking for it. It's just like when there's a new car on the market and you're thinking about buying it, all of a sudden you see all of them. You see all the advertisements. But until you chose, right? Making a decision is a huge impactful thing in our lives. Until you chose to want something, you won't see the opportunities to get it. And if you don't see the opportunities to get it, you won't have the clarity to know what you want when you get in the situation where you have to say yes or no. All day long, the biggest work of top achievers, of the elite, of the people who are really serious about making an impact in the world, all day long, our biggest, hardest work is saying no. It's not saying yes. There'll be a very small percentage of things you truly want, truly, if you're really conscious about making a decision, that you truly want enough to say yes to. 99.9999, the rest of it, you'll need to say no to in order to get what you really want. That's the true cost of achievement. So at this point, I'm going to leave off for our webinar. I hope you've gotten a plethora, an immense amount of information from this. It's a great topic for us. And please do a bit of research if you're curious. Look at the brain science behind it. Look at actually the studies again and again that are showing this is exactly how it works. So if you want to put your brain to work for your goals, start to get some clarity, get some visualization, some exercise, and start to really put yourself in every situation where it's a yes towards what I want or it's a no away from what I want, and we choose to go towards. Have a fantastic month.